Christmas Eve and Christmas Day. Mild for most, with some rain, colder in the north.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
I'm Darren McCaffrey, and join me on The Briefing Monday to Thursday at 3 p.m. You'll get your afternoon fix of all the latest political stories, debate and analysis, as well as interviews with some of the biggest names in UK politics.
It's a problem that affects the whole world, Darren.
From Westminster to Cardiff, Edinburgh and Belfast, if it's happening in UK politics, we've got it covered. That's The Briefing with me, Darren McCaffrey, Monday to Thursday, 3 p.m. on GB News.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Good afternoon. It's time to debate the big issues of the day with me, Liam Halligan, and Anaya Falarin Iman. Christmas is a wonderful time of year, but for many it can be the most difficult.
So today, we're asking, how do we help those in need this Christmas? All that to come, but first, here's the news.
Good afternoon, I'm Rosie Wright. This is your news at 2 o'clock. £1 billion is being made available by the Treasury to support businesses most impacted by Omicron in the UK. Industry leaders have been calling on the government for further support as the hospitality sector suffers increasing cancellations over the festive period. The funds include £6,000 grants for hospitality and leisure firms in England. The government will also cover statutory sick pay for those who test positive or have to self-isolate. And £30 million will be added to the Culture Recovery Fund to help museums and theatres in England. The Labour Party have welcomed the measures but say they should have been introduced earlier.
Look at the grants that we're providing today, up to £6,000 for hospitality businesses. They are comparable in generosity to the grants that were provided when these businesses were fully closed, completely closed earlier this year. It's worth £1 billion, so it's a very significant amount of support. So I think taken together, the steps we've announced today will help hundreds of thousands of hospitality businesses and the millions of people that they employ.
Scotland's First Minister Nicola Sturgeon is due to give an update shortly on any further restrictions after an increase in daily COVID cases. Meanwhile, in England, new COVID restrictions are unlikely to be introduced before Christmas, but the Prime Minister says the government won't rule out further action. The man accused of terrorism and of fatally stabbing Conservative MP Sir David Amess has pleaded not guilty. Sir David was killed during a constituency surgery in Essex in October. 25-year-old Ali Harbour Ali is charged with his murder and with preparing acts of terrorism between May 2019 and September of this year. A full trial is expected to be held in March. The chairman of the Police Federation of England and Wales has been suspended amid an investigation into alleged sex crimes. John Apter has also been suspended from duty by Hampshire Constabulary. The allegations relate to claims of 4 breaches of professional standards between October and this month. A criminal investigation is also being carried out into claims of sexual touching on 2 of those occasions. Now, rail operators across the United Kingdom are running reduced timetables in the run-up to Christmas because of coronavirus-related staff shortages. Dozens of train journeys have been cancelled by cross-country every day this week. Avanti West Coast has removed all peak ticket restrictions over Christmas to help spread demand. There's a reduced service across Southern, Thameslink and Great Northern networks until the day of Christmas Eve. And Greater Anglia have cancelled a number of trains. Northern Rail and ScotRail are all running amended timetables. And TransPennine Express is warning of short-notice cancellations over the next fortnight. The World Health Organization is urging leaders and individuals to make difficult decisions now, declaring that 2022 must be the year the pandemic ends. The Director General is warning that the Omicron variant is spreading significantly faster than the Delta strain and urged caution over the festive period, saying an event cancelled is better than a life cancelled. The new variant has already been identified in 89 countries across the world. In the US, the strain accounts for 73% of all new infections, more than 650,000 Omicron cases detected last week. Dubai's ruler has been ordered to pay £554 million to settle a custody battle with his ex-wife over their 2 children. He's going to have to pay the largest sum to ever be granted by a UK court in such a case. The High Court judge ruled the bulk of the payout is for the children's education and lifetime security, and also to address the grave risk posed to them by their father. £251 million will be paid to his ex-wife for the upkeep of her British homes and for future security. Big Ben will finally chime on New Year's Eve with all the famous faces of the clock tower on display for the first time in 4 years. The Elizabeth Tower and the bell mechanism have undergone the biggest restoration project in their 160-year history. The bell will be struck 12 times to mark the start of 2022 as the project to restore Westminster's Elizabeth Tower nears its end. You are now right up to date. I'll bring you the latest headlines at 2:30. Now, back to Liam and Gloria.
Well, thank you, Rosie. Coming up today on Piero and Halligan, Christmas for some can be a time of difficulty, isolation and loneliness. So we're asking, how do we help those in need this Christmas?
Plus, we'll be crossing live to Holyrood, where First Minister Nicola Sturgeon is updating members of the Scottish Parliament on the spread of Omicron north of the border.
And it's not just our guests, we want to hear from you as well, so make sure that you join the conversation. Email us gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet us at GBNews.
Now, the Christmas period's a wonderful time of year where we spend time with our loved ones, exchange gifts and eat some great food.
But also, unfortunately, for too many, it is a time of difficulty, financial worries, and for some, a reminder of not even having a roof over your head.
The rise in fuel prices, the cut to universal credit, the lifting of the eviction ban and furlough poses a grave danger to individuals and families who are really struggling.
Homelessness has rocketed in the last few years. Lord John Bird, editor of the Chief of the Big Issue, wrote in The Guardian this week that some 688 people lost their lives on the streets last year.
We're in the midst of a cost of living crisis. Inflation hit 5.1% in November, and there are more price pressures to come. With this in mind, food banks across the country have also seen a drop in donations despite bracing for what many fear will be their busiest year to date.
It's an important issue, and there is no better time to ask, how do we help those in need this Christmas?
Joining us now on the show is the founder of the Raise the Roof Homeless Project, Carl Simpson. Carl, thanks a lot for joining us here on GB News. Tell us about how your project helps the homeless and the work that Raise the Roof will be doing over the festive period.
Hi. We've got a fair bit on over Christmas this year. We've got soup kitchens on Christmas Eve. We'll be giving Christmas dinners out, Christmas parcels to people, basically warm clothing, socks, little toiletries and stuff. And then on the evening, we've managed to get one of the restaurants in the area called Wings. they're opening up to serve full meals for 100 people in need. So the homeless and anybody what's in need.
And is Christmas usually a particularly challenging time for the people that you support?
Christmas is a very hard time of the year. It's when if you've not got anybody around you, it's a very lonely time. People are sat in, for example, if people are sat in the doorway, they've got shoppers to see, people will come and talk to them normally. Over Christmas, it's very quiet and people get a lot of time to reflect. There's a lot of people lose their lives at Christmas because of the period of loneliness and regret. So it's the busiest time of year, to be fair.
And do you think the situation, Carl, from what you've seen so far, is worse than previous years because we've been through this pandemic? We know that a lot of households, vulnerable households, have suffered. If there's self-employment, they haven't been on furlough. Businesses have folded. Jobs have been lost.
Yes, exactly. We've seen a big increase in people coming to us for support. We try to offer people ways out, like if they're struggling with paying the rent and stuff like that, through support. But the numbers have increased for several reasons. There was a lot of mental health issues that have been affected during the pandemic as well. There's relationships breakups, but mainly financial. People are finding it a lot harder now. They've lost their jobs. The universal credit's gone back. There's a lot of reason, and the numbers are just coming up and up. Plus, the cost of living now is way higher than it was a couple of years ago. Even food, petrol, everything.
And what could be done from the government or even individuals within society to help some of the people that are suffering during this time with homelessness?
Well, the biggest problem we've seen is affordable accommodation. It's very hard to get people into affordable accommodation in the area we are and across the country. The people are paying up to where we are in Hull about up to £100 for one room in a house. People on the streets can't afford this because they haven't got no bonds or anything. So if there was some more sort of affordable accommodation available, it would be a lot better. That's where we seem to be breaking down. It's hard to get people back into work, which we offer work training and all stuff like that. But it's really hard to get people back into work when there's nowhere for them to live, to clean, to sleep. It's very difficult.
From Hull, that was Carl Simpson, the founder of the Raise the Roof Homeless Project. Carl, thanks for all the work you do for the homeless, and all the best to you and your family for Christmas and the New Year.
Absolutely. Well, we're delighted to now be joined by David Carter, who's a trustee at the Community Cupboard, which is a food bank charity that helps those who are struggling to put food on the table. Thank you so much for joining us. I mean, how does your organisation or your food bank help families?
Thank you for having us, first and foremost. We are very lucky that we're tied in with lots of local organisations, government schemes and things like that. So we are quite firmly amongst everything locally. In relation to what your previous guest said, he's absolutely right. The numbers in every single sector are staggeringly high at the moment and continuing to rise. So the best thing for any organisation, whether it be grassroots, charity, whatever, is for people to know they are there. And the more people that know they are there, subsequently, the more help they can either give or receive. So awareness is hugely important.
David, Carl Simpson just joined us from Hull. You're down there in Kent, pretty different part of the country. Carl told us the situation in terms of homelessness and poverty is particularly bad this Christmas, given the pandemic in his part of the country. Is that the case in your part of the country?
Absolutely. I think that's it's a national issue at the moment. People from every walk of life are struggling, and that's reflected in the numbers. It really doesn't matter what part of the country you're in. The same problems are affecting different people right the way across. So, yeah, it's a huge, huge increase in every sector you can think of.
And we just spoke to somebody that was working in a homeless charity, and your organisation is a food bank charity, and oftentimes that's already when crisis point is, when they need help after they're already in some challenging situations. Are there anything that can be done to prevent people getting there in the first place?
Well, this is one of the key issues at the moment, and it's vitally important for charities and organisations to work together, because there are warning signs in, certain things obviously are beyond people's control, but there are warning signs where if the right people work together at the right time, they can ultimately stop situations like homelessness and repossessions and so on and so on. And that's where the whole net, the infrastructure really can make a massive, massive difference. Luckily, there are plenty of people around in different capacities that can help, and thankfully there are also some wonderful local charities that can pick up the pieces when sadly things do go very, very wrong.
What can ordinary people do, David, who want to help out, who feel concerned that fellow citizens, neighbours are financially vulnerable this Christmas?
The best thing to do is to be aware, it sounds silly, but be aware of what's around you. Check on your neighbours. The amount of people in social isolation at the moment is terrifying. And then subsequently the ramifications from that for mental health obviously spiral. But just literally, just be vigilant, keep an eye out, say hello to your neighbour, throw in, the courtesy, how you doing, is everything okay? Because it is awareness of yourselves and your local environment that makes the biggest difference. We can have changes from up on high, but if you don't know what's going on your doorstep, then how could they possibly know up there? So literally, it's cliched and it's twee, but go back to days of old, say hello to your neighbours, make sure everyone's all right, and just do what you can locally, because I guarantee you there is a wealth of facilities available locally that people would not know about.
And also, David, what can ordinary people do, or even the government do, to help organisations like the one that you support in order to help you continue to do the great work that you're doing?
Well, as I say, we're very fortunate. We are very well supported, but and I know I sound like a broken record, but it's awareness of what's going on. There are situations we've seen nationally. There's a torrent of people who've been evicted, for example, who are now living on the streets. And the reality is, when those people end up on the streets, it is the independent charities and the organisations that pick them up. So government help in some description will benefit every single organisation you can think of. So it is, again, a broken record, I know, but it is awareness of what's going on. And if there is anybody that can help in any capacity, then I guarantee you those people will desperately take that off their hands, because the numbers are rising in a ridiculous rate.
Dave Carter, trustee at the Community Cupboard in West Kingsdown in Kent. Thanks for joining us on GB News and for the work you do.
Yes, well, remember to join in on the conversation. Email gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet us at gbnews. Just after the break,
we'll be continuing this discussion on how we help those in need at Christmas time throughout the show today. Do stay with us. But for now, it's the weather.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hello there. Here are your headlines for the next 24 hours into Wednesday. A brighter start for some after a frosty night before more cloud and rain arrives from the west. Now, as we head through into Wednesday, high pressure wanes towards the near continent. Low pressure waiting in the wings across the mid-Atlantic, driving cloud and also outbreaks of rain through the latter part of Christmas week into Christmas Eve. So through Tuesday evening, we will see some holes in the cloud develop across some parts of England and Wales, as well as Scotland. So a fairly widespread frost, a colder night than recently. That's away from Northern Ireland and the West Country, where we'll see a brisk breeze and always more in the way of cloud. And that leads into a cold start to the day on Wednesday morning. But we will see some sunshine, hazy sunshine at that, as cloud continues to thicken. And you can see this rain just moving up across Northern Ireland, clipping the western side of Scotland through the morning into the afternoon. Some showers trailing behind, so we could see one or two of these across Wales as well as the West Country. Elsewhere it's dry, it's fine, but it will be cold outside, temperatures struggling. But we hang on to some brighter weather across eastern fringes through the latter part of Wednesday. Through Wednesday evening and overnight, that rain continues its passage northwards. Snow over the Scottish mountains with some showers moving in across England and Wales. And then slowly but surely the air turns milder. Yes, there will be a lot of cloud around and also more rain waiting towards the west with some stronger winds. So all in all, things start to turn a bit more unsettled. And then as we head into the Christmas period, Christmas Eve and Christmas Day, it does turn milder for many before a battle between the colder air towards the north and the milder air towards the south. Highest chance of seeing snow, the northeast of Scotland on Christmas Day. I'll see you later. Bye-bye.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Join us for Political Correction. We're here every Sunday to correct politics and put you, the people, back in charge.
We talk about all areas of the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland.
Our debate goes way beyond the Westminster Village. It's about the real country. It's about your opinion. So please, we want you to tell us what you think.
This is Political Correction.
Every Sunday morning from 10 a.m. here on GB News.
You're watching GB News live across the UK, the world, and our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We're here for you. Don't forget to join our community by hitting the subscribe button.
And download the GB News app so you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you. Email us at gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
Welcome back. We'll soon be crossing live to Holyrood, where First Minister Nicola Sturgeon is about to speak about the spread of Omicron cases in Scotland. But just before that happens, we're joined in the studio by GB News political correspondent Tom Harwood. What are we expecting here from the First Minister? This is coming off the back of the Treasury just announcing in England more support for hospitality and leisure industries.
Absolutely, and we can't forget that earlier as well, money was given by the Treasury to both Wales and Scotland for those for areas that have within hospitality suffered over those lack of bookings, over those cancellations that we've seen in recent days and weeks. But really, this announcement today follows on from announcements that Nicola Sturgeon has already made about people being advised to limit their social contact, being advised to have the smallest possible Christmas. But she has said that she doesn't want to change the rules for Christmas. She wants to give people certainty for this weekend. So I think it's highly unlikely that the rules will change for this weekend. What we will probably see is rule changes for what comes after that.
I mean, one of the things that's been quite striking over the last 18 months is how the different devolved parliaments have differentiated themselves in terms of their lockdown policies. I mean, there is still some difference between them, between England and Scotland. Could you tell us a bit more about that?
Absolutely, and there's been a great deal of political criticism to the extent to which these differences have been criticised as being difference for the sake of it, trying to drive those wedges between the constituent parts of the United Kingdom. Of course, for many, many months after England abolished all internal restrictions, you still had restrictions in Scotland. Of course, vaccine passports have been the case in Scotland for a long time, much longer than, of course, they've only just been brought in England, but right from the summer they've been the case in Scotland and indeed in Wales, which has been an interesting situation in Wales because you look at various different parties and they have different stances depending on where in the United Kingdom they are. They've all converged a little bit after that Plan B vote last week. But before then, what you had is the Labour Party introducing vaccine passports in Wales, opposing vaccine passports in Scotland, and being sort of sometimes for them and sometimes against them in England. And of course, the Scottish Conservative Party implacably opposed to vaccine passports. That's why the leader of the Scottish Conservatives, who is not only a member of the Scottish Parliament, but also a member of Parliament across the UK, voted against the Prime Minister's plan for vaccine passports last week, one of 100 Conservatives to do so. This is the interesting political dynamic, I think. When we're looking at the measures that were brought in last week, the Conservatives had a huge rebellion over relatively small measures. How much further they can go is anyone's guess.
Tom, here is Nicola Sturgeon addressing MSPs at Holyrood.
To rate the steps we can all take to make family celebrations this weekend as safe as possible. I'll also confirm Cabinet's decision to propose some additional protections in relation to large-scale live events and indoor public places. We judge these to be necessary to further slow the spread of the virus so that we can protect health, the National Health Service and the economy as we work to complete booster vaccinations. And I'll set out further support for the many businesses affected by the advice we feel duty-bound to give in the interests of protecting public health. First, though, today's statistics: 5,242 positive cases were reported yesterday, at 14.9% of tests carried out. 515 people are in hospital with COVID, one fewer than yesterday. 37 people are in intensive care, also one fewer than yesterday. And sadly, a further 9 deaths have been reported, taking the total number of deaths under the daily definition to 9,790. And I want again to send my condolences to everyone who has lost a loved one. Presiding Officer, in last week's statement, I reported that cases had increased by 25% in the preceding 7 days, and that we would, in all likelihood, see a further increase in infections as Omicron became the dominant strain circulating in Scotland. Omicron has now firmly established itself as the dominant strain. We know from the S-gene dropout indicator that it now accounts for 62.9% of all cases. That's compared to 27.5% this time last week. Omicron is significantly more transmissible than previous variants, and we estimate its R number is well above 3. It is currently spreading rapidly across Scotland, and so the steep increase in infections that was predicted last week has now started to materialise. Cases increased by more than 50% in the past week, from over 3,500 a day on average to almost 5,500 a day. There were increases across all age groups, but the biggest, an increase of 161%, was in the 20 to 24-year-old age group. The rate of acceleration in an age cohort with, to date, lower levels, relatively speaking, of booster protection underlines the vital importance of everyone getting booster jags as quickly as possible, and I'll return to that later. However, as the booster rollout is completed and bearing in mind that it takes around a week for immune protection to take effect in individuals, we must also act to slow down the spread of cases. And I want to explain why that is so vital. Firstly, the toll that a rising wave of infections will have on health and social care is considerable. We don't yet know if the proportion of Omicron cases needing hospital care will be lower, higher or the same as with Delta. However, there is still no compelling evidence that Omicron is intrinsically milder than previous strains. However, even if the proportion of cases needing hospital care is lower, as we hope it will be, a smaller proportion of a much larger number of infections will still have a deeply damaging impact. As well as the suffering caused to individuals and families, the additional pressure on our already stretched National Health Service will be extremely difficult to manage. In addition to that, if large numbers of people become infected, even mildly, the impact on the economy and critical services through sickness and isolation absences will be crippling. Indeed, we are already starting to see this impact. 100 ScotRail services were cancelled yesterday due to staff absence. Theatres are already being forced to cancel shows due to COVID cases amongst cast and crews. And even more seriously, staffing shortages are already being felt across the supply chain, and they are exacerbating the intense pressures that the NHS and emergency services are working under. So this is why we must act, and let me be clear again, this is not a choice between protecting health and protecting the economy. If we don't stem the spread of the virus, both health and the economy will suffer. Now, before I set out the action we must take, let me address one further point. Some ask why we can't wait until we have more data and know exactly the impact Omicron will have on the NHS. I totally understand the temptation to delay, to hope after 2 long years of this that further steps might not be necessary. But firstly, as I said a moment ago, we are already seeing a significant impact from staff absences across the economy and public services. We must do what we can to stem this. And secondly, we know from experience that if we wait until the data tells us conclusively that we have a problem, for example, with hospital admissions, it will already be too late to act to avoid that problem. We must act quickly insofar as we are able, given our financial constraints, and we must get ahead of the data if we can. So the obligation of government is to take difficult decisions to keep the country as safe as possible, no matter how unpopular these decisions might be. So let me now set out the steps we all need to take. Firstly, though, let me stress we are not changing the advice for Christmas that I set out last week. It is important that with just a few days to go, there is certainty about family gatherings on Christmas Day and Boxing Day. I am not asking anyone to change these. However, and I can't stress this enough, please do follow advice to keep family celebrations as safe as possible. Keep gatherings as small as your family circumstances allow. Make sure everyone does a test shortly before getting together. Anyone who tests positive should not mix with others. And given how infectious Omicron is, you should assume that if one member of a household is positive, the others are likely to be so too. Follow hygiene advice and keep windows open. And crucially, between now and Christmas Day, cut your contacts with people in other households as much as possible. Minimise socialising with others, either at home or in indoor public places. Indeed, stay at home as much as is feasible. This is the best way of avoiding getting COVID and having to isolate over Christmas, or inadvertently spreading infection when you do meet up with others. I'm really grateful to everyone who has followed this advice over the last week. It will be making a difference, and I want to stress this point. The steep increase in cases over the past week would have been steeper still, but for people complying with this advice. So I hope we may already be collectively slowing the spread. But it is important that we stick with it. So my first new request of everyone today is this. From the 27th of December, as we come out of the Christmas weekend, and at least until the end of the first week in January, when we will review this advice again, please go back to limiting your contacts as much as you possibly can. Please stay at home as much as is feasible. When you do go out, maintain physical distancing from people not in your own group. And difficult though it is, please follow this advice over New Year. Minimise hogmanay socialising as much as you can. If we all follow the advice to minimise the contact we have outside our own households, we will help limit the spread of infections. So this is the bedrock of our plan for the immediate period ahead. However, while our core advice is to reduce socialising and stay at home as much as feasible, the Cabinet's judgment is that we must also take some further steps to make the places where people might still gather as safe as possible. And that is why we are proposing some additional protections. None of these are being proposed lightly, but we do consider them necessary to help stem the increase in cases, safeguard health and protect the NHS, the emergency services and the economy while we complete and get the full effect of the booster programme. So first, from the 26th of December, inclusive of that date, for a period of up to 3 weeks, we intend to place limits on the size of live public events that can take place. This does not apply, let me stress, to private life events such as weddings. For indoor standing events, the limit will be 100. For indoor seated events, it will be 200. And for outdoor events, at 500 seated or standing. Physical distancing of 1 metre will be required at events that go ahead within these limits. This will, of course, make sports matches, including football, effectively spectator-free over this 3-week period, a situation similar to that in Wales from Boxing Day. And it will also mean, unfortunately, that large-scale Hogmanay celebrations, including that planned here in our capital city, will not proceed. I know how disappointing this will be for those looking forward to these events and for the organisers of them. But I want to underline why we think this difficult decision is necessary. Firstly, we know that the much higher transmissibility of Omicron means large gatherings have the potential to become very rapid super-spreader events, putting large numbers at risk of getting infected very quickly. Limiting these events helps reduce the risk of widespread transmission. It also cuts down the transmission risks associated with travel to and from such events. And second, and this is not an insignificant point, these large events put an additional burden on emergency services, especially the police and ambulance services, at a time when these services are already under severe pressure and also dealing with high staff absences. Limiting large-scale events will help them focus on delivering essential services to the public. So I would ask the public, despite the disappointment I know this decision will generate, to please understand the reasons for it. Second, we intend to issue guidance to the effect that non-professional indoor contact sports for adults should not take place during up to a 3-week period from 26 December. This is because these activities where physical distancing is not possible also create a heightened risk of transmission. And finally, from the 27th of December, again for up to 3 weeks, we intend to introduce some further protections in hospitality settings and other indoor public places to reduce transmission risk in what are, through no fault of those who run such venues, higher risk environments. I can confirm that a requirement for table service only will be reintroduced for venues serving alcohol for consumption on the premises, and we will also ask indoor hospitality and leisure venues to ensure 1 metre distance, not within but between groups of people who are attending together. And we will continue to advise, as I set out last week, people that if they are attending indoor hospitality or leisure venues, and remember our core advice remains to minimise this, there should be no more than 3 households represented in any group. Presiding Officer, I know how unwelcome this will be for everyone, but we believe these precautionary steps will help us navigate a difficult period more safely. I'm also acutely aware that these decisions and the advice we are giving the public have significant financial implications for many businesses. Last week, I announced £100 million of support from within our existing resources for affected sectors. I can also confirm eligibility and guidance for the hospitality sector will be published on the Scottish Government website today. Since then, the Treasury has given approval for money that would have come to us later to be allocated now. As I have said, we had already budgeted for most of that money, and so we cannot allocate it now without causing significant shortfalls elsewhere, including in the health budget. Money simply cannot be spent twice. However, we estimate that the Treasury announcements do give us additional spending power now of £175 million, and I can confirm today that we will allocate all of this to business support. The Treasury has also, in the last hour or so, announced additional funding for business. Unfortunately, it would appear that this announcement generates no further funding for Scotland and that any consequentials are already contained within previous announcements by the Treasury. I can, however, announce that the Scottish Government will allocate a further £100 million from elsewhere in our budget between now and the end of the financial year. This will involve really difficult decisions, but the impact of the current crisis on business is such that we consider it essential. So taken together, this adds up to a fund of £375 million that will help support businesses for the unavoidable impacts of our decisions over the next 3 weeks. This is significantly more proportionately than the Chancellor has just announced for businesses elsewhere in the UK. Presiding Officer, while this is significant funding, I understand that it will not fully compensate business. As I said last week, my view is that the scale and urgency of the Omicron challenge requires financial support for business on a scale similar to that at the start of the pandemic. However, current UK funding arrangements mean, firstly, that only the Treasury has the borrowing powers to provide support on such a scale, and second, that financial support at scale is triggered only when the UK Government takes decisions for England. All of this means that our ability to act to protect public health and to compensate individuals and businesses affected is curtailed. This cannot be right in a public health emergency. So while today's Treasury announcement may be a welcome acknowledgement of the crisis businesses face, it does not yet go far enough. We will therefore continue to press the UK Government to take the threat of Omicron more seriously and to act accordingly. But in the meantime, we will, indeed we must, live up to our own responsibilities to do everything we can to protect health, lives and livelihoods here in Scotland. Presiding Officer, before I conclude with an update on vaccination, let me cover 2 further points. Firstly, it remains our priority, I hope Parliament's priority, to reopen schools as normal after the Christmas holidays. Indeed, one reason for asking adults to make sacrifices for a further period after Christmas is to help minimise any impact on children's education. However, to help ensure that schools are safe environments for young people and staff, updated guidance based on recommendations from the Education Advisory Subgroup was published at the end of last week. Colleges and universities are also assessing any steps they need to take for the new term, and some are returning to a default model of online learning for the start of the new term. For everyone involved in education, staff, children, students and parents, this has been another exceptionally difficult term, and I want to say a heartfelt thank you to all those who have helped ensure that children have been well supported, and indeed to children and young people themselves for the tough times that they continue to endure at such an important stage of their lives. Second point I want to cover briefly relates to Test and Protect. The current surge in cases is putting significant pressure on Test and Protect, and I'm grateful to all of its teams for working so hard to help break chains of transmission. From this week, Test and Protect will flex its approach as necessary to ensure priority is given to higher risk settings such as hospitals and care homes, where outbreaks can cause most harm. For many of us, this means that if we test positive, our contact from Test and Protect teams is more likely to be by text or email rather than phone call. Please make sure you respond to these messages and complete the online form that is sent. This helps your contacts get the right advice as quickly as possible. And if you are the contact of someone who tests positive, please follow Test and Protect advice. This will help slow the spread of the virus. Let me turn finally to booster jags, which are, of course, our best line of defence against Omicron, and they are what will get us through and out of this difficult phase, I believe. There has been a significant acceleration of the programme in the past week, and I thank everyone involved. A further 2 large-scale vaccination centres have opened this week, at Hampden in Glasgow and at the Edinburgh International Conference Centre. Yesterday, 69,135 boosters or third doses were administered. That means well over half now of the adult population has had a third dose or a booster. Last week, I said that our target was to have 80% of the eligible population vaccinated with boosters by the time the bells strike on Hogmanay. I can confirm today that we are now confident we have the capacity to meet that target. But of course, to reach it or get as close to it as possible, we need everyone who is eligible to come forward. So if you have an appointment booked for January, please now reschedule it for December. Appointments will be available right through Christmas Eve and then next week up to and including Hogmanay. So please book an appointment now. Alternatively, check out the location of drop-in clinics and go there instead. Getting fully vaccinated is the best thing any of us can do to protect ourselves, our loved ones and the country, so please do get boosted before the bells. Presiding Officer, this statement in some ways feels distressingly similar to the one I gave this time last year. Just a few days before Christmas, I'm again urging people to stay at home as much as possible to slow down a highly infectious new variant of COVID. But although it might not feel like it, we are in a much stronger position than last year. We have had far fewer restrictions in place for much of this year than was the case in the previous year. Christmas Day this year will be more normal than last year. Most importantly of all, a rapidly increasing number of adults is now protected by 3 doses of vaccine. And all of us, as individuals, know what to do to protect ourselves and each other. So please make sure you do all of these things. First, get fully vaccinated as soon as possible. Second, test regularly. Our advice, of course, is to stay at home as much as possible, but if you are meeting other people, test before you go every time and test as close to going as possible. And this is really important, of course, for family gatherings on Christmas Day or Boxing Day. And finally, take all the other precautions which can help to make a difference. Work from home when possible. Stay at home as much as you can. If you do visit indoor public places, limit the number of households in your group to a maximum of 3. Wear a face covering on public transport, in shops and when moving about in hospitality, and make sure the covering fully covers your mouth and nose. Keep windows open if you are meeting indoors, even at this time of year, and follow all advice on hygiene. Sticking to all of this is really hard, but there is no doubt whatsoever it will help keep all of us safer. So I want to end this final statement before Christmas, Presiding Officer, with a heartfelt thank you to everyone for everything you have done to help us through another exceptionally tough year. I wish everyone the happiest and safest Christmas possible, and of course a much better and brighter new year ahead.
Thank you. The First Minister will now take questions.
That was Nicola Sturgeon talking to MSPs in the Scottish Parliament. Holyrood will soon be going to David Donaldson, our GB News Scotland correspondent in Edinburgh. But for now, Tom Harwood, our political correspondent, is in the studio. Tom, some pretty important announcements there from Nicola Sturgeon. It seems to me that that kind of thing's going to end up coming to England too.
Well, it will be very hard for it to come to England, I would suspect, looking at all of those measures. And it's worth re-going over some of those measures now. Indoor events limited to 100 people standing. 200 people seated. Outdoor events, just 500 people, effectively emptying football stadiums and the like. 1 metre physical distancing imposed across all of these hospitality settings. Table service only for venues serving alcohol. Effectively, the end
all
of
of this is after
pub.
Christmas, isn't it?
All of this is coming in from the 26th and the 27th of December. So these are pretty seismic changes. The sort of changes that I think most people across the United Kingdom thought had been put behind us. And I wonder how many of these measures would make it past the House of Commons in the UK were they to be attempted to be imposed upon England. We saw 100 Conservative MPs rebel against the relatively light-touch measures of vaccine passports for nightclubs and large events. Now, if we're talking about sort of the end of the pub, in terms of the way that we know pubs and bars and that sort of thing, and nightclubs closing and all of the other implications of these measures, I think we'd see a much larger rebellion and potentially some letters going into the chairman of the 1922 committee demanding the removal of Boris Johnson. I think he has less room to move than Nicola Sturgeon has done here. This, of course, lasts for 3 weeks from the 26th and 27th of December, upon which it will be reviewed. And how many times in the past have we heard that something will last for 3 weeks, just 3 weeks, and then there'll be a review stage? I wonder how long this will last in reality.
Well, thank you, Tom Howard, our political correspondent. Hopefully he'll be bringing us more information on that. We're also now joined by our Scotland reporter, David Donaldson. He joins us now from Hibernian Football Club. Thank you for joining us. Could you just sum up what was said for us, David, as well?
Yeah, I mean, obviously we heard there, I'm here at Easter Road, Hibernian Football Club's ground. They've got a match against Aberdeen tomorrow, which will be played with fans there. However, as you heard, that's not going to happen from the 26th of December onwards, because all games are going to have to be played behind closed doors. The good news in terms of Scottish football is that there's a winter break coming up at the start of January, where there'll be no football anyway. So it's only a matter of 2 or 3 games that the clubs are going to have to play behind closed doors. But as Tom rightly pointed out there, these restrictions have got a habit of being put in place for much, much longer. The big news as well here, of course, is that the big Hogmanay Festival in Edinburgh will be cancelled as well. There's 30,000 people expected there. That's not going to go ahead, and any larger Hogmanay celebrations across the country as well. So that's going to be huge, huge disappointment for people. The hospitality industry on its knees, not just in Scotland but across the country, across the UK, is also going to be back to table service, 100 people, 200 people and 500 people outdoors, so that's going to take a huge hit. Nicola Sturgeon did soften the blow there, though, with an announcement of £375 million, which will go to the hospitality sector, which I'm sure will come as great news, although she did have another swipe there at Boris Johnson and the UK government in terms of not enough funding coming north, and she probably has a point. I'm sure that some of the devolved countries would say that as well, in terms of Wales and Northern Ireland not getting any money or not enough money they feel to help out the hospitality industry, and others struggling during the pandemic.
Christmas isn't cancelled north of the border, Davey. The First Minister was keen to stress that, but it will be a much quieter Hogmanay.
Yeah, and that will come as a huge disappointment to many. Like I said, there are 30,000 people expected in Edinburgh city centre for those Hogmanay celebrations, which are famous right across the world. That's not going to take place now, and I don't think it will come as a huge surprise to many, given the numbers we've seen, the increases we've seen. But still, just less than a couple of weeks before it starts, or 10 days before it's actually due to happen. We've now got a situation where it's not happening, and not just that, not just in Edinburgh, across the whole of Scotland, Hogmanay is still a huge thing. So that's going to be, annoying for a lot of people. But I think most people will probably understand, is this the time to be mixing in big groups? Probably not. And Nicola Sturgeon said earlier on as well, they can't wait for the data to come through because they have to act now. And that's exactly what she's done. She's decided to take a step ahead and say, look, let's sort this now. And obviously the football stadiums, in terms of fans, the clubs will lose revenue from that. So they'll have to be supplemented as well. But you'd have to say it's probably the right decision given the numbers that we've seen.
David Donaldson outside the Hibs Stadium in Edinburgh. Behind closed doors games for now. Thanks for joining us.
Yes, and we've been asking today, how do we help those in need this Christmas? We spoke to at length at the beginning of the programme about some of the financial and accommodation worries some people have been experiencing this winter. But what about loneliness?
Well, according to the UK's Office for National Statistics, 7.9 million people in the UK live alone. And research from Age UK shows 1.4 million older people are expecting to feel lonely this Christmas, feeling depressed, anxious about that time alone. As further restrictions loom, concerns for how those alone will be impacted are bound to be raised.
Yeah, so what can we do about all of this? Well, we're delighted to be joined by Simon Walls, who's a clinical lead at the St Cecilia's Care Home. I mean, could you tell us more about some of the challenges people may be experiencing with loneliness this Christmas?
Yeah, of course I can. It's a difficult thing, is loneliness, and it's not just on people that are alone. It could be couples that are together. It could be all sorts of things, and it can have a massive detrimental effect on people's mental health. It's something that if we know somebody that's going to be alone at Christmas, or we feel that they could do with someone going round, then you can look at helping out your neighbours and things like that, but it will have a massive detrimental effect on people.
Are you already introducing measures in terms of who can visit people staying with you? Can family members visit people staying with you? Because, of course, when we were under full lockdown, it was often, understandably, some will say, quite difficult for family members to visit their loved ones in residential care homes.
Yeah, it was a very difficult decision, I'm sure, to make, to say that visiting had to be completely, that there was none at all. And it puts a lot of pressure on the families and also on the staff and the residents, that they need to try to keep up the resident spirits and things like that. and it does have a massive detrimental effect on them. The visiting at the minute has been reduced to 3 people per family. So if there's a large family that's difficult and we have to pick out, we don't pick them, we let the family, the next of kin, whoever's first call for us, choose who the people are that they want to be the 3 members. But it can be very difficult in large families, and again, that can have a detriment on family dynamics as well.
And is there more that we can do as a society? I mean, when I think of a lot of kind of ethnic minority communities, they have intergenerational housing. That's quite normal to look after the elderly, but actually it's quite a significant cultural problem in this country about elderly people in particular living alone and so on. Is there more that we could do as a society in order to respond to that?
Oh, I think you're absolutely right. I know that a lot of people in the Asian community are very family orientated, and they have lots of family members who will make sure that everybody's all right and go around and things like that. We don't so much have that in our culture, although I know that there are some very fantastic people who do go around, visit the elderly and go out their way to do it. But I mean, we could all do it. We can all go and see someone if we know that they're going to be alone at Christmas, and even just a small gift or just go in and say hello will be a massive boost to them at Christmas.
Well said. Simon Walls of Celia's Care Home up there in Scarborough.
Yes, and joining us now on the show is Programme Director at the Campaign to End Loneliness, Robin Huins. Thank you for joining us, Robin. I mean, we've just heard from our previous guest about some of the challenges that particularly elderly people in care homes are facing. I mean, do you, in your campaign, see a similar experience in terms of loneliness, particularly with the elderly?
Yes, so what we've seen is that people who were most isolated, such people in care homes, did have a really difficult time, and the Age UK report that you mentioned at the beginning really brought that out. But actually, the people who were most affected by loneliness during lockdowns were younger people, probably because they've got more of their most important social relationships outside of their household. They might not live with their partner. You can't see your best friend so easily. And also kind of talking to people, older people said, well, I've been through a lot before already in life, so I can kind of manage this kind of difficult period more easily.
And Robin, unfortunately, we're running out of time, but what would you say to people watching this programme who are lonely?
So recognise it's a normal thing. It's completely reasonable to find this a very, very difficult time, and people can be lonely at any stage in their lives. But it's worth recognising that it's difficult, but reaching out and also trying to build up your confidence, because the worst thing about loneliness is that it can reduce your confidence. It can make it more difficult for you to reach out, but really do try to find the confidence to do that and do other things that will build up how you feel by getting out into nature, thinking about more positive things, and remembering really good things that have happened in the past to motivate you to feel more confident about the future.
And what can us as citizens, ordinary people, do to make sure that people aren't feeling alone during this really challenging period of time?
Well, I think that the thing about loneliness is that it often makes you withdraw further. So if you're feeling all right, it's much easier to pick up the phone to someone and just say hello and see how they are. So it's really worth just thinking about people around you who might be going through a bit of a tough time, and just doing that thing of picking up the phone, knocking on the door, doing whatever's kind of safe and allowed. But that there's a lot we can do. It doesn't need to be the biggest and most amazing kind of support that you provide, but just those little bits of interaction can make a real difference.
Robin Huins, Programme Director of the Campaign to End Loneliness. Thanks a lot for joining us here on GB News.
Absolutely. Well, you've been watching Piero and Halligan on GB News with me, Anaya and Liam. We'll be back tomorrow at 2 p.m.
Up next, it's Darren McCaffrey, GB News political editor. He brings you his afternoon briefing. Thanks for joining us over the last hour.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hello there. Here are your headlines for the next 24 hours into Wednesday. A brighter start for some after a frosty night before more cloud and rain arrives from the west. Now, as we head through into Wednesday, high pressure wanes towards the near continent. Low pressure waiting in the wings across the mid-Atlantic, driving cloud and also outbreaks of rain through the latter part of Christmas week into Christmas Eve. So through Tuesday evening, we will see some holes in the cloud develop across some parts of England and Wales, as well as Scotland. So a fairly widespread frost, a colder night than recently. That's away from Northern Ireland and the West Country, where we'll see a brisk breeze and always more in the way of cloud. And that leads into a cold start to the day on Wednesday morning. But we will see some sunshine, hazy sunshine at that, as cloud continues to thicken. And you can see this rain just moving up across Northern Ireland, clipping the western side of Scotland through the morning into the afternoon. Some showers trailing behind, so we could see one or two of these across Wales as well as the West Country. Elsewhere it's dry, it's fine, but it will be cold outside, temperatures struggling. But we hang on to some brighter weather across eastern fringes through the latter part of Wednesday. Through Wednesday evening and overnight, that rain continues its passage northwards. Snow over the Scottish mountains with some showers moving in across England and Wales. And then slowly but surely the air turns milder. Yes, there will be a lot of cloud around and also more rain waiting towards the west with some stronger winds. So all in all, things start to turn a bit more unsettled. And then as we head into the Christmas period, Christmas Eve and Christmas Day, it does turn milder for many before a battle between the colder air towards the north and the milder air towards the south. Highest chance of seeing snow, the northeast of Scotland on Christmas Day. I'll see you later. Bye-bye.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks.